callers that we're very happy to have here. We're going to start with Ryan. Ryan, I believe, is from the state of Georgia. I believe they call that the Peach State. Has called here before. Ryan, thanks so much for calling in. Always good to have you on the show.
Thanks, Adam.
What's going on?
Not a whole lot. Trying to figure some school stuff out, but other than that,
Oh, you're still in school. Yes, I
yeah.
remember those days decades ago. So, if I recall correctly, you're a Bulldogs fan.
Yes.
All right, there's two things I want to ask you here. When I watched that game against Notre Dame, and for all you Rutgers fans out there, we talk everything college football when our guests call in, and we diversify the show, and we're going to be adding Rutgers basketball soon and a few other surprises, so stay tuned. All right, so when I looked at that Georgia Notre Dame game, I came away thinking there's absolutely no way Georgia should have lost this game. The fumble in the red zone, the failure to convert on fourth down in the red zone. I think there were 3 or 4 trips in the red zone where they came away totally with 3 points. Then they're giving up a kickoff return to start the second half. What the heck happened to Georgia against what I thought was an inferior Notre Dame team?
Well, the talk about the fumble in the end zone. That's or the red zone. That is the first time Trevor Etienne had either fumbled in his college career or fumbled in the red zone in his college career.
Right.
So it's three years. Decides to fumble there. We had he's our backup right tackle playing left tackle. Monroe Freeling, who got worked the entire game, and both fumbles by Gunnar Stockton came off of his side.
Oh, yeah, terrible.
Yeah, we should have won that game.
I think you could have dominated that game, but it was just so many uncharacteristic mistakes. But I kind of feel like it was somewhat reflective, and of course there were a few drops. I kind of felt like it was reflective of the entire year for Georgia, where the roster was as good as any team in the country, but it just never seemed to click for the Bulldogs this year, and I'm not sure why. What do you think as a Georgia fan?
The quarterback, well, I'll say quarterback play. Really, it was our receivers.
Yeah.
We led the country in drops. Arian Smith, I believe, was the leading receiver in drops. Just can never get on the same page. Carson Beck didn't have a great year. He threw 3 interceptions against Alabama, threw what should have been 2 interceptions against Texas in the SEC championship game, but got bailed out on those with pass interference calls.
Right.
The tackling was a huge issue for some reason. So nothing ever clicked at the right time. Georgia never played I don't think Georgia ever played a complete half of football.
No, I don't think they did either. And that was going to be the second question I was going to ask you. But I see we have another caller. Mac is coming on, and Mac's been on the show before and also provided some very good commentary. So I want to bring a second Georgia fan on here. I'm glad that I attract all these Georgia fans. Hopefully, you guys will reconsider your allegiance next year and continue, visiting this show and bring Rutgers into your family as a team that you support. But let's bring Mac on the show because I want to ask Ryan, you and Mac, since you're Georgia fans, what was Beck's problem this year, and why did he transfer to Miami? I have a theory about why, but I want.
I've got a theory.
Who are more girlfriend? Go ahead. What'd you say?
Got a girlfriend.
That was my theory too. Coincidentally, he went to Miami where he is, and good for him. Hope his relationship is wonderful, but he's on a team that has arguably one of the most, if not the most talented rosters in the country. Zachariah Branch is coming in from USC, a real playmaker. And you go to Miami, a team that has no defense. And Miami, despite Beck's inconsistent play, is paying $4 million. What's wrong with this picture, Mac?
Well, I think the biggest thing wrong with it is a woman named Hannah Cavender who took him away. But and I think leaving a school to follow a relationship is quite an asinine idea. However, uh, I think it's good for us because, as I've said before, I'm not a fan of him. So we've lost him. He's gone to Miami. As he said, Miami doesn't really have a great defense. They're not going to have a great offense now either. Carson Beck was leading in interceptions for like the first half of the season. The dude couldn't
Right.
throw the ball. When he was on, he was on, but when he was off, he was off. And if you're only on 50% of the time, you're not a very good quarterback. So I've never really got the hype around him. I'm ready to see him go. And in
Yeah.
regards to that Notre Dame game, well, we can, get back to that later, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
Well, that was one of those games where everything that could go wrong went wrong. But when I was mentioning to Ryan before, like it just seemed like nothing clicked for Georgia this year. They had the talent, but it just didn't seem like the team gelled. And I think against Alabama, in my opinion, the most devastating part of that game that hurt Georgia was not the interceptions from Beck. It was the fumble from Beck when they were driving. That was such a killer. And then, you look at the game against Ole Miss, but then you see them go into Austin, Texas and absolutely destroy a very good Longhorn team. It's a Longhorn team that was about to tie the game against Ohio State when they had the ball on the 1 yard line until Quinn Ewers just decided to, I don't know how to describe that series and the decisions. But so do you think there's a culture problem at Georgia, or do you think this is more attributable to like NIL and the current state of college football?
I think NIL has screwed over everything, but
I don't think it's a culture issue. Because if it's a culture issue, we would have seen a lot more players leave than we did.
Right.
I think it boils down to kind of like you said, NIL, for at least for Carson Beck,
Sure.
because he initially entered the draft.
Right.
But then here comes the University of Miami knocking on the door with $4 million, and I mean, how are you going to turn that down? But you mentioned the Alabama game or the Texas game. That's a game where Carson Beck had 3 interceptions.
Yeah, that's true. So what's with the interceptions? I mean, is he just is his head not in the game? Is he not focused, or does he just take too many chances? What's his style of play that's leading to this?
Well, he said in a press conference something to the effect of he doesn't really even like football. Because he was asked if he watched football outside of playing, and he said no, that he wasn't a fan of football or something to that effect.
I see.
it seems like his
Okay,
head is
so
in the game, and the game being all of football, not just their individual showings against other schools.
all right, Mac, I think you just hit the nail on the head, and Ryan, you did too. That's why the team didn't gel this year. That's why there was this like kind of just disconnect with the team. I think Beck's head is not in the game, and when you have a player like that, doesn't matter how talented they are. And I think that may be in fact a good thing for Georgia that he's gone.
And that's where I'm going to 100% disagree from Ryan. I think there was a culture problem there. Just because we didn't see a lot of people leave doesn't mean it wasn't a culture problem. Maybe it wasn't toxic culture. Maybe Kirby Smart wasn't the problem, but there was a problem with the culture because it wasn't winning, because it didn't win.
Yeah, and the Notre Dame game I think was like kind of encapsulated the entire season. So, still had a good year, guys. You still won the SEC championship with the nation's toughest schedule. So, congratulations on that. What are your thoughts about next year for Georgia?
I'm cautiously optimistic. Gunnar Stockton is coming in, his first real a good long look at him. He played well against Notre Dame. I think he made some mistakes that you would expect first-time starters to make.
Right.
I mean, just simply looking at it, he wasn't checking his blind side very well. That's what led to those two. Partially, what led to those 2 strip sacks. I like the redone wide receiver core, picking up Noah Thomas, Zachariah Branch.
Yeah.
You'll probably see a combination of those 2 guys, Dylan Bell, and then you've got Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delk coming back. We've got the number one tight end in the country in this year's recruiting class coming in Ellis Williams. And the defense looks good. I'm a little worried about our front four.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really young. I think we're going to be relying on a lot of freshmen, incoming freshmen, and rising sophomores a lot. And then our safeties as well. We're losing both our starting safeties. We did bring in like Adrian Maddox from UAB. We brought in Zachariah's brother, Zion Branch.
Right.
And we brought in a guy from Miami, funnily enough. So I think it's gonna be a lot of plug and play with KJ Bolden back there. He was a freshman All-American. I think that he's gonna be very good. But Kirby Smart's gonna have to do what he does. He's gonna have to turn these guys around as we didn't win the SEC, but there's gonna have to be some adjustments made for sure. But I think we've got a good outlook. We've got Alabama, Ole Miss, and Texas all coming to Athens.
Yeah. The schedule is so much more favorable. You're going to have the roster, and you got, in my opinion, the best coach in the country to win an SEC championship. Despite, I think, we're in some internal issues with the culture, is a real testament to your team. So it seems like another playoff for Georgia next year. I'm going to predict a 2-loss season. But when I turn to Rutgers, I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on this because typically a team like Rutgers, they recruit a majority of 3 stars. Georgia's got about 4 or 5 stars when they recruit, maybe 11 or 12 4 stars, 15 3 stars. But Rutgers, like the Hawkeyes of Iowa, are dominated by 3 stars. And I don't care how good you develop, that's not going to compete against the Ohio States, the Georgias, the Texases. So when I think of NIL, as much as I hate it, I see it actually as an opportunity for teams like Rutgers, who traditionally cannot compete for the 4, particularly 5 stars, to do so if they buy them. And that, in my opinion, is the only way Rutgers is going to be relevant in a Big Ten that's going to be incredibly competitive now with Oregon, of course, USC, Washington, and, of course, Ohio State and Michigan. So if you were hired to turn Rutgers football from a 7-6 team to a playoff team, how long would you need to do it, and what would you do?
Well, I mean, the first, I would need give me 5 years.
Okay.
The first thing you need to do is you need to look at in-state. You've got the number one player in New Jersey is actually committed to Georgia.
Right.
And I don't think Rutgers has a top 5 in-state recruit committed to them. And in a small state like New Jersey, you can't have that happen. So you've got to focus on in-state recruiting. I know you're surrounded by a lot of big schools. I think Saquon Barkley came out of New Jersey. He obviously went to Penn State. You've got Ohio State coming in. I think taking the number 2 recruit out of New Jersey.
Okay, yeah, and it's funny you say that because I grew up in New Jersey and I went to Bergen Catholic High School, which is along with Don Bosco, is generally the number 1 and 2 teams in the state. Bergen Catholic actually went down to Florida this year to play IMG, lost 27-17. But here's what happens, because this was happening even when I was there in 1993. The very, very good players at Bergen Catholic and Don Bosco go to Rutgers. The great players at Bosco and Bergen Catholic go to Ohio State or Penn State. And it happens time and again. Now, Kyle Monangai for Rutgers was a Bosco product, and certainly I think is going to be drafted. But, Rutgers needs depth, and they need consistency on the roster to compete with like a Georgia or an Ohio State. So what's attractive about Rutgers is that academically they're a good institution. They're local. But I don't think players are going to want to go to Rutgers if they're 7-6 and playing in the Big Bowl. And I think they need to get 5 stars or at least a few 4 stars and start a 5-year process, like you said, because once these elite players start going to Rutgers, other elite players are going to want to go there. Their record's going to improve. They're going to have a better record of putting people in the NFL being successful in life. But to do that, ironically, the NIL, which I don't like, gives them the opportunity to do so. But I don't know if they're going to commit the resources to do that. What do you think, Mac? Do you think we should just resign ourselves to mediocrity in Piscataway and, enjoy the Jersey Shore and the Sopranos and say, hey, we'll always be talking about what could have been?
I don't think you should, and I was going to answer similarly to Ryan. You need to figure out how to keep those Jersey kids in Jersey. Because obviously, it's not like there are no good football players in the state of New Jersey. They're just leaving. Why are they leaving? They're going to schools that are more attractive, but what are they also doing? They're going to schools that are more fun. See, a benefit of going to Georgia is you're going to school in Athens, Georgia. And, regardless of how you feel about it, it's one of the best college towns in the country. So you need to make the entire university more attractive to anybody. Because you could give them all the money in the world, they're not going to want to go play football in, a barren wasteland.
Right.
So you need to get the Jersey kids to want to go to Rutgers, and then you can focus on developing the team that you have with the kids that you can bring there. Focusing on coaching, focusing on working up those kids. If you have a good coaching staff and a good winning culture, you can get the team to go far above and beyond the statistics that you would see just from their recruitment class. You don't need to be worried about buying players until, you look at the players that are easily more cheaply at your disposal just by fixing up your image a little bit and maybe focusing a little bit more on advertisement.
All right, that's a really interesting analysis, and maybe you're right. Maybe it's not about buying the players, but about building the culture and the environment at Rutgers so that people want to come to New Jersey. Rutgers, it's a nice campus. New Brunswick, where the main campus is a nice area. But you're right. It's not a Georgia. It's not Tuscaloosa. It's not Columbus. It's not Ann Arbor. And I think the thing that Rutgers has going for them right now is Greg Schiano. Schiano is one of the best coaches. But when you have a recruiting class, even this year, 28th in the country, that's dominated by 3 stars, I question, can you develop those 3 stars to a significant enough potential where you could make the playoffs? Or are you just kind of setting yourself up to be the next Iowa or, the next Illinois, where you'll be competitive with teams, but you'll consistently lose to them? And
you're gonna need a couple stars. You're gonna need a couple standouts. But what I'm saying is, instead of going and pulling them from all across the country and paying them very, very handsomely in NIL money, get them from the state. Get your kids from New Jersey, proud to go to Rutgers. Get your 4-star in-states to go there. Don't spend as much money on them. Put it somewhere else. Put it in coaching. Put it in development. And anything else, really.
Well, and going off of what Mac just said. So I just went back and looked at some of the top recruits out of New Jersey in the last couple of years. And going to last year, 1 and 2, Jordan Thomas, Nair Daniels. 1 from Don Bosco, 1 from Bergen Catholic.
Right.
Both went to Georgia. Both projected to start next year. If you go to 2022 state rankings, just put New Jersey in just to see. You've got Davidson Igbenson. Pronounced that right.
Did he go to Rutgers? I think he went to Rutgers.
No, he went to Ole Miss, transferred to Ohio State, just won a national championship. Jaden Bellamy, cornerback out of Bergen Catholic. He just played for a national championship at Notre Dame. So you've got talent in state. The talent is there. There's no need, like Max said, forget dropping $1 million on the best player out of Florida. Forget it. Work on making these Jersey kids want to stay home. Taiwan Malone, number 1 player in the class of 2021 from Bergen Catholic, went to Ole Miss, plays baseball and football.
Yeah.
Audric Espine, who was an insane player at Notre Dame's doing pretty good in the NFL. One to St. Joseph's.
Right.
So you've got in-state players. You've got the talent. Even just looking at the list of the top 5, top 10, there's not a lot of 4 stars there.
Right.
But even the 3 stars, there's talent, there's quality.
Yeah, you're right.
Something I just looked up is how far is Bergen Catholic High School from Rutgers University? It's 50 miles down
It's about an hour.
I-95.
Yeah,
I know, sure, New Jersey traffic is probably horrendous, and that's why all you people are so insufferable. But go drive an hour and a half. That's about from Atlanta to Athens. Go to the school where your good players are and recruit them. I thought, maybe it's far away, but no, when it's that close, it's less than an hour. What excuse do you have to lose your homegrown players to Georgia, to Ole Miss, to Ohio State, to Notre Dame?
Especially when there's so many amazing Italian restaurants on the way from Oradell, New Jersey to Piscataway. I agree with you. And then I think, well, look, in the state of Georgia, Georgia rules. And Georgia took 2 people from USC that committed to USC and brought them right back. In Alabama is a very nearly irresistible pull. But Rutgers isn't New Jersey. And the only thing I can conclude from that is that players look at Georgia and they say, oh, my God, I can play at Georgia for Kirby Smart. I'm going to be in the NFL. I'm going to make a lot of money. And they look at Rutgers and kind of say, well, I would probably want to play here, but they don't have the same tradition. They don't have the same reputation. And that's what I think is really dogging Rutgers. So, and I don't mean to criticize Coach Yano. He's been the best coach in the Scarlet Knights history, but I kind of feel like to build it from the bottom up, like you're saying, is going to be very difficult when you're going against an establishment of teams that is so superior in their tradition that the initial attractiveness for the players is to go there. So that's why I was saying, hey, why not just buy them and try to do it from the top down that way? But maybe your approach is right, and we'll see going forward, certainly.
Well, you're right. It is difficult. Winning isn't easy, but you've got 2 options there. You've got the route that is, buy players, and then you're just basing yourself off the backs of good players, or you build up a genuinely good program that will last for decades and not just disappear if you pull funding.
Yeah, and as a philosophical matter, I totally agree with you. Like, I don't want to buy players. I don't want to take that approach. I hate NIL. I think it's terrible. But I also think practically what might be the only way to do that. But, yeah, I think you're right. Philosophically, yes. If we could do it that way and commit to that, and I think we have a chance to do that under Shiano, that's the best approach.
And on a whim, I just decided to look around surrounding states for New Jersey. Why does Rutgers recruit better in New York? You've got the number 1 player. You had the number 1 player in New York committed to you for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
So what is so different from recruiting New York kids to go to New Jersey when you can just keep the New Jersey kids in New Jersey?
That's a great question. I think that it's difficult to say with any degree of confidence what the reason is, but having gone to Bergen Catholic, I think a lot of the players, Notre Dame and Ohio State have, and to some extent Michigan, have built kind of a pipeline to those schools. They are recruiting those kids from their sophomore year. Another one from Bergen Catholic, Jared Garantano, Tennessee.
Yeah, went to Tennessee. Was not good, but
was not good. It was not very good, yes. But he went to Tennessee over Rutgers. So I think it's a combination of the prestige of the program, probably what they perceive as a better chance of making the NFL. But at the same time, they're getting the number 1 person from New York. So there's something about the messaging, I think, that has to change.
Well, you've got a problem now with your neighbor right on over to the side of New York, Syracuse, Fran Brown.
Yeah.
He's built a heck of a program in a year. It's not, in my opinion, crazy to say that Syracuse was in a very similar position to Rutgers was. Middling at near the bottom of Syracuse, especially as a weaker conference to Rutgers has been. And yet it takes Fran Brown a year to turn Kyle McCord into one of the best quarterbacks in the country, a bowl win, and now they're getting recruits out of New Jersey. So something has to change. And from what I understand, Syracuse isn't dealing out NIL money left, right, and center.
All right, so you make two great points. Number one, Syracuse was in a similar position to Rutgers, but what they did was they got McCord. And McCord, I think, had the most passing yards of any quarterback in Division I this year, or in the FBS. And that immediately improved Syracuse's, stock, and they were certainly competitive, winning 41-38 against Miami to knock Miami out of the playoffs. Rutgers hasn't gotten that player, but there's something else you just said, which is number two, they're not giving millions of dollars to players. So something about the messaging or the people is making, someone, like McCord want to go to Syracuse. Because who would have thought the starting Ohio State quarterback would pick Syracuse? Something. Rutgers needs that to be successful.
And I hate to bring Georgia back into this, but you know where Fran Brown came from?
Georgia.
And he was one of Georgia's best, if not our best, recruiter. So as much as I know Rutgers loves Greg Schiano,
right?
There's something about Fran Brown, who's 30-something, and has been on the recruiting trail, going all these in-home visits, making all these players love him. And then he took some of Syracuse's best players this year, Jackson Meeks being one. He took with him. Jackson Meeks was at Georgia.
Wow.
So I think when Syracuse, Greg Schiano's getting up there in age.
Yep.
I think that when he decides to call it a career, Syracuse doesn't go out and bring some, 70-year-old guy in to come coach. You find a young coordinator who has been a proven recruiter, who's built these connections. You go out, you give him as much money, you give him a blank check,
right?
And you ask him to fix us.
I think that's a great plan, and I think what they've done at Syracuse in 1 year is a testament to the fact that Rutgers can do it too. But I think maybe you're right. Maybe it's not the fact it's not that they're not giving out enough money. It's that they're not making the program as attractive as, say, Syracuse is making it. And I think with regard to Schiano, and why they're not doing that, I don't know, but it is a messaging and marketing issue maybe. And they do need to get very elite recruiters and, refine that message and have a blueprint like Syracuse did. Now, as far as Greg Schiano goes, I think most Rutgers fans would say he's the best coach in the history of Rutgers football and a really great man and a great coach. I see Coach Schiano now at his age as more of a transitional coach, taking Rutgers from traditional mediocrity and building a bridge towards ultimately the college football playoff, where he won't be the head coach, but he'll put us in a position that we have the foundation to get there. So the next coaching hire, the next hires across the board are going to be critical. And I think that's going to happen in the next 4 to 5 years.
I think so too. And once again, no disrespect to Coach Schiano. I know what he's meant to the Rutgers program, and seeing what he did in the 2000s, and then he has turned y'all around to a degree now. Right. But you bring in Athan from, I believe it was Iowa,
Minnesota.
It's all this. They're all the same
thing.
It doesn't. And he was middling there, and he's the definition of a game manager quarterback.
Yeah.
But I think you need to find someone. I mean, you look at some of these guys at other schools. Kevin Jennings at SMU, Max Duggan when he was at TCU. Haynes King's a little bit different, but even he was a 3-star as a transfer.
Right.
These guys that you don't necessarily need to find an established starter like Kyle McCord was, but you need to find someone who's got a spark.
Yeah. It goes to those intangibles. And I just think you're right. I think at best, Kelly Kamanis is a game manager, and game managers aren't going to win you championships. And not to disrespect him, and certainly not to disrespect Coach Schiano either. But, I will say, the last thing I'll say is when you look at that Notre Dame-Georgia game, I think there was a period, or maybe it was the Penn State game, where somebody named Steve Angeli came in and led a drive for a touchdown. Guess where he's from? Bergen Catholic. So that's another reason. That's another example of something's not right with the messaging at Rutgers, because if Syracuse can do it, like you said, Rutgers can too. Any last thoughts, guys? It's always nice speaking to two people who are fans of an elite program and that has enjoyed success. Hopefully, Rutgers will be there someday, and I'll get to continue wearing my red shirt. But any last thoughts?
Congratulations on getting over 1,000 subscribers. This channel's starting to take off a little bit. I'm happy to see it.
I appreciate that, Ryan. Thanks so much. Mac?
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for being on the show. Always great commentary. You're welcome anytime. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Adam.
Have a good
All
one.
right. Take care.
You too.
All right, everyone. That was Mac and Ryan. Always happy to hear their intelligent commentary. Great discussion about the future of Rutgers football. And tonight, we talked about Ethan Kaliakmanis, and we'll continue to look at each player on the Rutgers roster. And like we did tonight, talk about the things that Rutgers can do tangibly and intangibly to get to that level where they can compete with the Georgias and Ohio States, keep those recruits in New Jersey, and make the Garden State one of the premier places to play in college football. With that, we wrap up tonight's show. We're going to be back here every Monday live to take your calls and comments at 7 p.m., and we'll also have additional shows as news breaks at Rutgers football. So thanks, everyone, for being here. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you next week.